Okay, so now you have collected your academic articles, you have focused on your research question, you have defined your topic, you have plenty of information, you have installed Zotero, you have organized the academic and journalistic sources, so that's fine. But it's really important that in your research you are really clear about the methods, because there is a plurality of methods that are possible. And I'm just going to make a very short introduction on this. There are really hundreds of books on organizational methods. You will find them at the end of the slide deck. And there are also many videos on that, on qualitative versus quantitative methods. So I will really just remain at the surface here, just to present the basic choices that you can make, right? But I really recommend you to go to handbooks on qualitative or quantitative methods, given the choices that you will make for your research, right? So here, yeah, I think maybe for an introduction, the most basic idea is that when you discuss about organizational or management research methods, you have always a very strong tension and choices to make between representativity, do the data are representative of the whole world, or richness. And there is always a trade-off between the two, representativity versus richness. Actually, you may have, I think that as a student, what you are inclined to believe when you start a research master or when you start your master thesis is that you need to have representativity. But that's not always the case, actually. Quantitative methods are really great. They try to build on quantitative tools to try to grasp most of the phenomenon and most of the sample. They're trying to reach representativity most of the time. At the other extreme, you may have single case study, and instead of trying to study a whole population of organization, of individuals, and to try to find the truth on this whole population, you're going to focus on one very tiny case, one single case. And actually, it's also an accepted methodology, so don't believe that you necessarily need to move into quantitative methods and to survey a large population to do research. It's perfectly fine and super interesting also to focus on single cases that are extreme, that are specific, and this is because their specificity is bringing some richness, and bringing something interesting. You have a metaphor that is frequently used by a researcher called Siegelko. He's talking about the talking pig, and he's arguing that actually if you are using quantitative methods to survey the whole population of pigs, if there is a talking pig into that population, you won't see it because it's so extreme, so exceptional that it's something that won't count if you study the whole population of pigs, right? But if you find a talking pig, then you must go into single case study perspective, because this pig is so exceptional that you really want to understand how he came to speak, and is this transferable to other pigs, etc., etc. So here it's really interesting to study the exception, right? And an illustration of that is medicine. In medicine, you are trying to find the extreme and the case instead of studying the whole population. So according to the project that you have, you may go into more quantitative methods or qualitative methods, single case study, etc. In the middle, there are different possibilities as well, For example, expert studies with the Delphi methods, which is a method to survey different experts on a new topic and to try to understand what are the big issues and big questions raised. And you may also have multiple case studies, which is that a single case study would be good, but you also have the opportunity to compare this extreme case with other cases and do a little bit of generalization out of that. And that's multiple case study. Here into brackets, you have like the classics. So multiple case study, I would really recommend you to read Eisenhardt 1989, And for single case study, single co would be a good reading also to explain it, okay? The big issue is, of course, coherence, coherence to your research project. So the big question is, how do you justify the appropriate balance between richness and representativity in your own topic, okay? Quantitative studies, as I said, are particularly relevant when you aim at measuring variables and verifying existing theories or hypotheses, or to question them, right? So you already have clear hypothesis on how your mechanism is working in real life. So you have clear hypothesis and you want to test it. So here it's clear that if you want to be in hypothetical deducting perspective, you should move into quantitative studies, And as well, it's very relevant when you address research questions that deal with who, what, how much, and you wish to quantify, to examine the relationships between different variables. So very often when you're moving there, you have to be very explicit about the constructs, how you operationalize it, have like a figure that is articulating it and explaining how you are testing the relationship between the dependent variable and the independent variable and the causation between both, okay? And you aim at describing relationships such as correlation or inferring causality, right? Delphi studies, I mentioned it, is like a kind of a hybrid between quantitative and qualitative studies. So here it's in situation where you aim at congregating expert opinion through a series of iterative questionnaire with the goal of coming to a group consensus. So you take a group of experts and you're going to ask them about like what are the big important points, and you are doing a series of interviews by refining step after step the question that you're asking. There is no true or knowable answer such as decision making, policy, or long range forecasting. It's an emergent phenomena such as how do like established firms react towards new platforms entering their market, and then you are going to find the good experts. They may be consultants, they may be coming from existing companies, maybe also from platforms themselves, and you are going to do a first open series of questionnaire and then you are going to take this first raw material to identify the big issues, and then in the second step you are going to do a second round of interview to test your hypothesis and your findings, okay? And here Delphi studies are really relevant when a wide range of opinions is considered better than a single expert to reduce bias. You want to have kind of representativity at a professional level on the question that you're asking, okay? Multiple case studies now are particularly relevant when you have an emerging phenomena, but the description is lacking, For example, how do companies facing very big strategic challenges may diversify into new activities? And maybe there would be variants, but you don't really know how companies actually respond. And so here, description of the phenomena is lacking, and there is variance within an homogeneous population or sample. And theory is a little bit lacking also to explain such variance. So basically what you want to do with multiple case studies is to select a good sample, but limited one, like 4, 5 companies, and try to explain the differences and build some emergent theory to explain that variance. And single case studies are appropriate when you spot a very specific case that is particularly symptomatic of a phenomenon. For example, social business are known to face a big problem, which is mission drift. How the mission gets away as the company grows. And this is a new phenomenon, original, a bit understudied, and you need to have fine-grained information on a specific case to understand how it happens. And you need to really have very rich data on that. And then when you have rich data, You can theorize on the mechanisms, you know, what's happening in the life of the social innovation companies so that they drift, you know, and you need to have rich data to theorize on a process, for example. So when you want to build a process perspective, explaining that there are different stages, etc., then single case study are often very, very good choices, okay? I would just like to conclude on this introduction on methods, that don't confuse methods with the type of data you use. You know, you may use primary or secondary data. Primary data is the data that you produce through, for example, interviews, etc. Secondary data is coming from already established sources. So maybe, for example, if you code TEDx speech, well, this is secondary data, right? Or if you code interviews that have been made with the press, this is secondary data. So be clear about primary versus secondary data. And also, actually, don't confuse qualitative and quantitative data with the type of methods that you're using, because you may be using quantitative data on a single case, you know, or you may be doing some multiple case study, or even with more quantitative data. So don't confuse the two. It's a little bit different, okay? To conclude, it is all about coherence and transparency, right? There is no one appropriate method. It depends. The data may be quantitative or qualitative. And keep in mind that it's super important at the end of the day that in your research master, you show your data, you explain your choices, and you are clear about the limitations. No methods is perfect, right? No methods is perfect. And we don't ask you to come with the perfect solution or the perfect research work. You just need to be aware of the limitations of your work and be transparent. And the research master, the master thesis, is really an exercise on transparency. So be transparent about the limitations of your work and it will be fine, as long as this is coherent and that the choices are coherent with your constraint and the topic that you're studying, okay? So I'm stopping here, and in the last video we'll talk about writing the thesis and the general format of the master thesis.